Hello and welcome, and thank you all for coming today. Today we're going to be talking about how to apply for the NSF GRFP, so the Graduate Fellowship, Research Fellowship Program. We have a lot of great speakers lined up today. What it's going to look like is we're going to have a small presentation from each of them, and then we have a couple questions, and then we'll open it up for everyone else who has questions. My name is Chelsea. I was a former Botanical Society of America student rep. Your current student reps are on the call as well. Do you want to introduce yourselves real quick?
Hi, I'm Shelly. I'm one of the current student reps for BSA.
Hi, I'm Anya, the new student rep for BSA.
Awesome. So if you have questions about BSA, you can always direct them to your student reps, your current student reps. Today, we're really grateful to have 4 different speakers, and I will let them end up introducing themselves. They would each start with a small presentation and then go from there. So today, Dr. Amanda Ingram will start us off.
Great, thanks, Chelsea. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be with you today. I am a longtime BSA member. I've probably been a member of the society longer than most of you have been alive. It pains me to say that. And I'm a rotating program director at the National Science Foundation in the biology directorate, and within that unit in the Division of Environmental Biology. And I was keen to join this today because I suspect that many of you will find your intellectual homes in the Division of Environmental Biology or one of the other biology divisions. So I want to give you a bit of an introduction today to how NSF is structured and what NSF does, because some of that context may be helpful as you craft your proposal. And if I can get my slides to advance, great. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background about the National Science Foundation, in case you're not terribly familiar with it, this is an independent federal agency whose mission is focused on funding basic research in a wide variety of areas. So we are there to promote the progress of science, to advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, to secure the national defense, and really just to make sure that the US continues to be a global leader in research and innovation. This is our lovely building in Alexandria. I miss it dearly. I am back at my house in Indiana, but it's a wonderful place to visit, and hopefully many of you will get a chance to come see us there soon. So as I said, NSF funds research in a variety of areas. I suspect that most of you will find that the Biological Sciences Directorate is where research that speaks to you is funded. Some of you, though, if you're paleobotanists, might find that the Geosciences Directorate is a more appropriate intellectual home for you. But there are lots of other areas, as you can see here, ranging from engineering to computer science, mathematical and physical science, and education and human resources. And that's where my other colleagues here today find their home. So in terms of what we actually do, we have the pleasure of funding a lot of scientific research and training. So we have a budget, here's the fiscal year 2019 budget of about $8 billion, and we're a really efficient agency, and the vast majority of that money goes to funding research, education, and related activities. You can see that we fund lots of institutions, lots of individuals, and hopefully some of you will be in that number of people supported by NSF in the coming years. NSF judges all of those proposals that come into us on 2 main criteria: intellectual merit and broader impacts. And my colleagues from the GRFP program will talk more about what that specifically means within the context of the fellowship application. But really, what reviewers are going to be tasked with looking for are proposals, or in this case, applications, that demonstrate lots of potential to advance the field, having creative ideas that are original and potentially transformative for the field, and ideas that are presented clearly and that show that the people who want to do them can do it and have access to the resources to do so. But we're also concerned about broader impacts, so making sure that people beyond the specific researchers we're funding benefit from the research. And this can take a wide array of forms, and I'll let the GRFP program officers talk a little bit more about what that means in the context of this type of proposal. So I thought you might want to know a little bit more about the Directorate for Biological Sciences and how it's structured so that you can maybe explore a little bit and understand some of the major research areas that we fund. So bio is interested basically in understanding life. And one thing we're not particularly interested in is biomedical research. That is funded by the federal government and other agencies such as the NIH. And so the good news for you is that you're not competing with people proposing biomedical projects as you put together these fellowship applications. So the Bio Directorate has within it 4 divisions, and these probably look kind of similar to some of the departments that you all call home. So these range in scale from the molecular scale, so molecular and cellular biosciences is the division that funds research in that area, to the large scale. Environmental biology is my home and where we fund work in ecology and evolutionary biology. And then bridging those 2 extremes is integrative organismal systems that really is interested in understanding how organisms work in their environment at the molecular level and also at a broader scale. And finally, there's a 4th division, the Division of Biological Infrastructure, and that's really focused on developing the people and the places we need to make the research happen. So here's a little org chart that you might find useful just to focus on the blue boxes down here at the bottom. These are the different programs that are distributed among those divisions, and you might find one that resonates with you that sounds like the kind of research you do. So for example, if you're a systematist, the Systematics and Biodiversity Science cluster, mine would be the one that funds research similar to what you would like to do. And it might be useful to you to take a quick look at the descriptions on our webpage to understand what it is that each of these clusters or programs funds, because you'll be asked in your GRFP application to identify the intellectual area that your application falls in, and those roughly correspond to some of the disciplines you can see here. So for example, this past year I ran a GRFP panel that was full of applications from systematics and evolutionary processes types of research. So they do get clustered together as they're being reviewed in panel. Okay. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to my colleagues from GRFP.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, GRFP. We're going to give you an overview today, talk about the goals and eligibility criteria connected with GRFP, and a little bit about the timeline and the application process. We won't be able to cover everything in detail, so please write down these important numbers. info@nsfgrfp.org or www.nsfgrfp.org. You can get a lot more information than we can give you in the next couple minutes about GRFP. There are experts in our operations center eagerly waiting to help you with your application. Just a little bit about the context of GRFP within NSF. As Amanda mentioned, NSF funds basic research for U.S. colleges and universities. And GRFP was NSF's first program and has been supporting graduate students since 1952. GRFP fellows come from every state and from over 400 undergraduate institutions. With me today is Dr. Narcrisha Norman, and she's going to provide you with a little bit more information about GRFP goals and the eligibility criteria.
Hi, everyone. So the overall goal of GRFP is to recruit individuals into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM areas. And before I go too far, I want to emphasize that given this short period of time that we have to speak to you, is really important for you as applicants to look at the solicitation to make sure everything is in detail. If anything changes, it's always posted in that solicitation. Okay, so the thing we want to do is we want to select and support individuals that have the potential to be high achieving scientists early in their careers. We also want to broaden participation in STEM for underrepresented groups, including women, minorities, persons with disabilities, and veterans. The award comes out to about $138,000. That gives the applicant then fellow 3 years of support with a $34,000 stipend and $12,000 towards their educational tuition and fees. For eligibility, this is GRFP is only open to U.S. citizens, nationals, and permanent residents. And again, we're looking for those early in their career, so undergraduate seniors or first-year graduate students who are pursuing research-based master's or doctoral degrees in STEM or STEM education. They have to be full-time enrollment in a degree program, at an accredited degree program, a nonprofit U.S. institution of higher education, and no foreign institutions are acceptable. So there are 4 levels, 4 academic levels for GRFP. Level 1 is for undergraduate seniors or those who just received their bachelor's degrees and they've never been in a graduate degree program, then not enrolled in a graduate degree program. Level 2 is for first-year graduate students. This is in their first graduate degree program. There are some specific rules for those in bachelor and master's degree programs. For instance, students who have completed 3 years in a joint degree program are also considered level 2s. Level 3s are second-year graduate students. These are students with no more than 1 academic year completed in their first graduate degree. And lucky for us, we have a level for level 4 students. And these are returning graduate students that have a greater than 2-year interruption in their graduate study. They may have a master's, but no doctorate degrees. These are our eligible fields of study. They are mirror fields of study to NSF, so from chemistry to STEM education. There are some subfields listed on that website, nsfgrfp.org, if you want to know what the subfields are. Ineligible degree programs are professional degree programs such as MBA programs or DDS programs. Also joint degree programs, so no GD/PhD or JD, I'm sorry, or MD/PhD. No MPH degrees, so no community or public health, no counseling, social work, and no education except, as I said before, in STEM education. And also no history except as the history of science. Ineligible fields of study include research with directly health-related goals, so such as disease prevention, public health, global health, animal models for disease, for drug development and testing, clinical research such as outcomes research or health services, standard of care or health policy, and research that directly lead into clinical trials. Applied research on plant pathology, such as maximizing agricultural production and impacts on food safety. Again, for a complete list, we suggest that you go to the solicitation. Then I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hill.
So thanks, Dr. Norman. It's important to remember that the major field of study when you apply with your GRFP application is really important because your choice determines the expertise of the reviewers for your application. And if you are selected to be a fellow, then the discipline for your graduate degree program for your first year must be within that same major field that you chose and used for your application. Here's an application timeline as a model for someone that's a level 1, an undergraduate student, someone that is not in graduate school. The applications are due in late October, and the reference letters are due about a week later. Then you would apply to graduate school, and then in late March, you get your notice connected with your selection or not selection for a fellowship, and you accept the fellowship in early May to begin the next fall. There are several parts to a GRFP application. The first part provides us with information about your education, about your work and research experience, about publications you may have had or honors. Then there's a 3-page personal background and future goals statement and a 2-page graduate research statement. Along with those statements, you also have to provide your transcripts, and these need to be provided as PDFs. And then you need at least 2 letters of recommendation. We suggest 3, but 2 are mandatory. As Amanda mentioned, NSF uses a merit review criteria system for the reviews of NSF proposals and NSF applications. And the basis for this merit review is intellectual merit and broader impacts. It's important to remember that the application for GRFP will be used as part of a comprehensive review. So applications are reviewed based on their demonstrated potential for significant achievement in STEM. The reviewers are asked to use a comprehensive, holistic approach that gives balanced consideration to all components of the application. You should think about being very careful in terms of following the format instructions, because applications that don't comply with the format requirements are returned without review. And please remember to submit. If you don't submit as part of your application, then they won't be reviewed. So those are some important tips. Well, the best advice we can really give you at this stage in this short little overview is to make sure you have this information so you can ask more questions about GRFP. So please write down these contacts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hill and Dr. Norman. Now, if Dr. McCourt, if you'd like to give us a little bit.
Sure. Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, good. And so, hi, my name is Rick McCourt. I'm a botanist, actually a phycologist, but that counts. I study green algae at the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. And I worked as Chris and Dr. Norman have told you, as a GRFP program officer, but that was a while ago. So my shelf life has expired a little bit for that. So pay more attention to them regarding the regulations and formats and things. But I can tell you a little bit about how to write a compelling proposal for plants, or at least that was my assignment. I don't know if it's possible to do that exactly, but I can mention a number of points and then you'll have time to come back to them in the Q&A if you want to. So first of all, you're not going to be talking to botanists necessarily. You would be if Dr. Ingram was on the panel, but she's not going to be since she works at NSF. So in that context, don't use jargon that a biologist or a scientist in general wouldn't know. I think DNA is fine, but ECM or maybe even PALP or something like that, if you're a phylogenetics person, you should explain a few things, but don't waste a whole lot of words on that. So just try to write without jargon. Try to assume a little bit of plant blindness in a good way, that people might not know everything about plants or be a special aficionados, but they're not going to be biased against them. And so explain the importance of what you're doing in the context of plant biology and your role in it. And one of the things, this is maybe just a pet peeve of mine, but I try to avoid telling or not criticizing students if they say, this will be the first time that so-and-so has ever done so-and-so, because usually the first time is not necessarily a good criterion for merit, right? Just because you're the first one to go out and count the number of seeds in a sunflower in Arizona, or in supposedly standing in virtual space here, that might not be that important. Okay, so explain the importance of it. It's got to be a question of interest to a general science audience. Writing for this should be considered a lot like writing anything, which is like avoid boring and avoid cliches. And you might take a look online for some communication videos by various people. Randy Olson is one. He's spoken at NSF and at botany conferences actually about how to write for a general public, how to make science interesting. Tell a story about what you're doing without making it up, so to speak, but make it a narrative that makes sense, is continuous, and kind of flows. Connect the pieces, which the NSF program officers here talked about. That is, there's an essay, there's a project research project description, and so forth. Make sure they all kind of are at least congruent with each other. They're not at odds with each other. Like, all your life you've wanted to be an oceanographer, and that's where you're going to study desert ecology next year. That's an obvious incongruence, but there are some things like that that might be a little jarring or not make sense. So look at the pieces and make them fit together. Finally, these are going to be reviewed by people, and these are scientists who will pay attention. You can assume a certain level of conscientiousness and transparency, and that they will be given instructions by the program directors about what to look for. And so those instructions are exactly what you're reading at the NSF grfp.org or nsf.gov site. So it's going to be all open and out there as to what they're going to look for. So don't try to guess what's in their mind. Read the instructions that they'll be looking at and follow, and assume that they'll follow them. And if they don't, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. So. And throughout, also the two merit criteria, intellectual merit and broader impact, should be kept in mind, because they're going to be in the back of everybody's mind. I worked at NSF for a few years, and it became a mantra. Broader impacts were not enough. Intellectual merit was not enough. You had to have sort of the whole package. Not sort of, you had to have the whole package. So keep that in mind, and it applies to the various parts of the application process as well. That being said, you don't have to touch every single base and touch down so lightly that you don't cover something in detail. Finally, this is about you and not necessarily about the science. Somebody asked a question before the meeting that I saw, which was, are you going to have to do the science you propose? And the answer is actually no. You have to work in the field you propose to work in. But they really want to see, can you formulate a scientific question that's interesting, figure out a way to execute that plan, and understand where you might be doing it. In some cases, you might know exactly where it is. So explain it that way. And then when you get there, no, you may discover in biology or in ecology or systematics, whatever you're studying, that this field has suddenly exploded and is really worthwhile. And NSF is not going to micromanage and say, nope, sorry, you have to work on algae after all. So, you will be able to change, but you want to make sure that it's about your potential as a STEM student, as a STEM career person, as a STEM professional. Finally, get some reviewers so that you can have people give you a take on it. And these don't necessarily have to just be the professors or Nobel Prize winner down the hall, but your colleagues and student friends, maybe even a relative if you have somebody who's a writer. If it's boring to you, it's probably going to be boring to them. If it's boring to your best friend, it might be boring to a reviewer as well, or not make sense. And so, take the feedback that they give you with some grains of salt, but pay attention to it, and you can run that by them as long as you have time to get their comments. So with that, I think that's enough, and I'm happy to stick around and answer questions, of course.
Awesome. Thank you guys for giving a little presentation and a little intro to the NSF GRFP and how to kind of make plant science interesting. So our first question is, which kind of projects get funded? They claim that it's not the project that gets funded, but the person. And so maybe just going like one step further, how do you like sell yourself as a person in those scenarios?
Well, as an applicant, you might try to put yourself in the mind of a reviewer and what they're looking at and what they've been asked to do. So they've been asked to look at the entire application, all parts of the application, and to review it in a holistic and comprehensive way. So, for example, with the research project, it might be a great idea for a research project, but you need to demonstrate in terms of the reviewer that you're a high potential young scientist and someone that is worthy of consideration for investment as an example of someone that would be part of the future of science. So it might be a great idea, but you also have to demonstrate that you're thinking thoughtfully about how to design a research project and all the components that might be connected with that. And that's just one part of the entire application. You have to think of all parts of the application that the reviewer will be looking at. I might also mention that it's important to remember that the reviewers will also be looking at the letters from your reference writers. And there's an opportunity to have your reference writers provide information about you and brag about you in a way that you may not be able to do yourself. And so it's important to share and coordinate your effort a little bit. And this is a suggestion, not only your application, but the reference writer that you're working with for your application.
My suggestion would be to make sure that you are clear and concise throughout your application. And again, the site that we suggested has a lot of frequently asked questions. So once you've read the solicitation in detail and read those frequently asked questions, that helps you kind of get the structure of what you want to write together. After that, you just, you know, be honest, clear, concise, and that's what they're looking for.
So I think, Alexia, you have a question. Alexis, you want to unmute yourself and ask it?
Yeah, mine is kind of like really specific, but I am a first-year PhD student. I'm just starting my first semester, and I'm coming straight from undergrad. And so I'm still fleshing out my research project for my thesis. And so I'm wondering, how fleshed out does the research project have to be? And if it would actually just be better for me to apply at the beginning of my second year when I really have a proposal for my research fully written and research like kind of already started.
Well, from the point of view of NSF, the commitment to do the research is not the key thing in terms of the review process. So we're not, from the point of view of NSF, expecting that the research you propose will be the research that is actually undertaken while you're a fellow, okay? Now you may want to think strategically about whether you feel that you're comfortable preparing an application during your first year or your second year. Please remember that you only have one chance as a graduate student in terms of submitting an application. And if you wait until the beginning of your second year, you have a very small window, because you can't have completed more than one full year of your graduate education and still be eligible for to apply for GRFP.
So the research we understand would change because there's a variety of reasons why the project that you suggested would change. But keep in mind that that major field of study, you're not allowed to change that major field of study that first year.
I could add, it's not, you might be asking the question because you're not exactly sure about the thesis project you have yet, because you probably haven't started classes yet or even met too many people. So if you're feeling really uncertain about that, I guess talk to your major advisor and maybe some other people about whether you think that they think you're ready yet. Because if you have a well-formulated plan, I don't think there might not be any difference between first and second year. But if you're really kind of uncertain, then waiting might be a better option. But this is based on a 60-second evaluation. So talk to people who are more familiar with what you're doing. But if you do feel uncertain about it, that's something to think of.
I think it's also fair to say that among successful applicants, there is variation in how detailed the research plan is. And that reflects to some extent this difference in stage where you are.
That's true. Your research proposal to your committee might someday go up to 8-10 pages long or more or something, and this is a much shorter piece of work. So you may not outline a Nobel Prize winning series of experiments in it, but if it's a coherent package of ideas, that would help.
I have a question about that too. Do you suggest like outlining a whole PhD worth of work, or like really getting more specific on a chapter, or what would your suggestion be when people are sitting down to write this?
I assume that's to me, Rick, or anybody. Okay. It's hard to answer that. If you really have a good idea of the whole thing, yeah. But if you don't, I guess don't shoehorn it into a more grandiose picture than it is. But it should be more than just like, I think, a simple experiment or like a science fair project. But it should be more of a conceptual approach to an issue or a set of problems that you're going to undertake. As Dr. Ingram said, maybe that might include some detailed experiments that you're planning, but also it could be phrased in such a way that you're going to use a certain approach, and that this is probably what's going to work. And you maybe have some research background in it so that people can see that you've done something leading up to it. So it's hard to answer that question. It's just like all answers. It depends, but don't try to make it more than it is. But by thinking it has to be a 5-year project plan.
So if it's okay if I follow up. So if I have research goals and a research location that allow me to have a vague outline of what I'd like to accomplish, would that be enough to apply then?
You may not necessarily have a research location, and even with what you add, the research you propose in your application, maybe you are not sure how it might turn out. It's better to say, this is what I'm thinking, this is what might come, this is what might not come, maybe I'm wondering, but to just be clear and honest about it. If you don't know the end product, then you can't possibly put that in there, and that's understood, because again, we're looking at the overall applicant.
Right. If you do know where you're going to work and you know what you're going to try, then you could include some information on that. Realize that with the help of your advisor, the more detail you provide, the more people can nitpick about the details. So it's a Goldilocks solution, right? You want to be detailed enough to be convincing, but not so detailed that they'll say, oh, well, you can't do that with a pH meter or something, you know. So get some help from your peers about that. But if you really have a very solid idea of where you're going, I think it's nothing wrong with including it.
Awesome. Does Carla D. Limaberg want to ask her question here?
Yeah, so I was hoping to get some clarification on the statement that the GRFP NSF released on the solicitation in regards to the priority research areas of AI and quantum information science and computationally intensive research. So I was wondering how these priorities will actually affect the review process. So will proposals be evaluated on the degree to which they incorporate these high priority research areas? So will it factor into decisions about who to award? And if they do affect the review process, are you looking for proposals that will directly study or further develop these technologies, or are studies that also utilize these technologies as a tool to further your specific research questions also encouraged?
Oh, thanks for that question. All fields eligible are listed in the GRFP solicitation. So NSF continues to encourage and accept applications in all fields of study and engineering as indicated in the solicitation. The language in the GRFP guidelines about the 3 fields you mentioned is encouragement for students to consider those emerging scientific fields if they are of interest. You do not have to focus your research on those fields. It's possible that some students could use these techniques in their research. However, your work may not involve any of these, and that's fine. NSF is going to use a comprehensive, holistic approach in terms of the review of these applications. It's going to use the merit review criteria that we've mentioned, and that's going to be applied to all the applications. And that's the same process that we've used in the past, and it's the same process we're going to use this time.
Thank you.
Awesome. Does Carla Olivardo would like to ask her question?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I think I already know the answer to it, but I'll just go ahead and ask anyways. I was just wondering if like as an undergrad, myself, if I could use I'm trying to put it into words, if I could use a project that I currently or just previously worked on as a project for my application.
Well, first, congratulations on being an undergraduate. That's a good place to be for a GRFP application, because you can apply this year, and if you're still an undergraduate or just have your bachelor's degree and haven't started grad school next year, and you want to apply again, you can do that again if you don't get selected. Remember that as an undergraduate or someone with an undergraduate degree, but not in grad school, you're a level 1, and a level 1 applicant can apply as many times as they want, as long as they're not in grad school. And in terms of your question specifically about using a project, think about how that might be used to help the reviewers understand how you have demonstrated potential to be an early career scientist. So if that is useful in some way to build the argument and narrative for your application, then please think about how you might approach it in that way.
This would be again another one of those instances, or Dr. McCourt said, where you can talk to your advisor, even maybe some of your reviewers, and ask them what do they think about it. References, I'm sorry, not reviewers.
So you definitely want to let people know that you've done that. It'll probably be part of your resume and your description of your interests and so forth. So in a way that can be part. It doesn't, you know, I'm not going to write the essay for you, and we can't do that. But you could talk about that in a couple of places, and it would make sense and support the idea that you're someone with some experience and potential to do the research because you've accomplished this thing. Maybe you've given a poster or even published something. So you could talk about it that way. And then if you take off from that to develop a more detailed project that spins right out of it, that's possible as well. So you don't just have to say you're going to repeat it or something.
Is there any other questions? You can just let me know if you have questions.
Hey, I'm so sorry, but the last 30 seconds of that kind of cut out, so I wasn't able to hear it, unfortunately. But this is recorded, I think, right?
It is, but I can reiterate it again. I think what I said was, you don't want to just say you want to repeat the study, but if there's something that grows out of it, you can describe what you've done already, how it succeeded, or what it did succeed or didn't, and what you want to do next. And so it can really show a growth of your thinking if you approach it that way. And then it doesn't have to all be included just in the project description. You're going to be talking about your background and other parts of the application and so forth. So you don't just want to repeat it, but it can be used as a jumping, a launching pad for you to develop a more detailed project. So you don't have to invent something totally new.
So question.
Okay, great.
So another question that people might have is, how do you make strong, broader impacts? Sometimes it's, if you're doing curiosity driven or maybe like herbarium work and you want to make it interesting, and how would you spin that? And then also, if you haven't done much outreach as an undergrad, like, can you just say that you're looking to do it in the future? How does that weigh against you?
Keep in mind that the broader impacts is more than just outreach activities. There going to be some broader impacts of your research. So broader impacts can go in a variety of ways. Again, I would have to refer to the website and say that there are videos and stuff produced by NSF that talks about what we mean actually by broader impacts. And it's up to you whether you want to talk about those you planned in the future, or those that you did in the past, or a combination of both.
In the GRFP application, in terms of broader impacts, you can think of it in two ways. One is the research, but also think about it in terms of you as an individual, how you may be part of the story in terms of broader impacts in terms of science and the future of science. So it's really an opportunity to think about it in that way, how you as an early career scientist can be the beginning of, be part of the future of science. The one piece of advice I would give is please do not ignore broader impacts. Make sure that you look at both intellectual merit and broader impacts and emphasize both. Focus on both those as part of your argument that you're the best person to be selected for a GRFP fellowship.
And I'll add just one note that it might be good to think of how to make it authentic. You know, and you're talking about plants or plant biology probably. And so it might come off, if you can do something that's broader impacts, as Dr. Hill and Dr. Norman have said, that fit those categories, but really applies to what you're proposing, that will be a compelling argument. If what you're saying could be said by 3,000 other people and interchangeable in those applications, then it won't be that different. It's just going to be run of the mill, you know, or something. So what makes it special? What about your project is going to be of interest to students, to yourself, to other scientists, to the society? And not all those can be satisfied at once, but those are some components.
And just a little bit of advice that we give to PIs, so the faculty who are applying with regard to broader impacts, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If there's an existing program at your institution that you can tie into, that might be a really interesting avenue to pursue. You might also think about what kinds of activities got you interested in this particular area and think about how that could be expanded or replicated, because surely you had a circuitous route getting to whatever subfield of botany you're interested in. And so you might get some interesting ideas there.
McKinley has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I was curious if COVID-19 will be impacting the amount of funding that's available, potentially the number of awards that you can offer, or if there will be a preference on certain awards that are maybe relating more to that kind of current situation.
COVID-19 is not part of consideration right now in terms of the selection or the award process for GRFP.
And the amount of, I guess, award funding that's available is still the same potentially as it would be in other years?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's not based on, there's no basis for it being connected with COVID-19.
I also have another question. How do you pick good recommendation letters? Like, let's say if you're at a small university and nobody from your university has gotten a GRFP before, so your professors probably don't have experience writing it. How do you get them and encourage?
Everybody will give you different advice on this, but the first thing I would do is share the solicitation with them, share your game plan with them. So find a way to coordinate your plan with how they can be the best advocates for you, but let them know what the ground rules are for GRFP. So walk through the solicitation with them in terms of intellectual merit, broader impact, all these things that we've been talking about. Let them be part of your plan, right? They're your team. They need to know what your plan is and how to best help you.
So I'm a faculty member at an undergraduate institution, a small liberal arts college. And as Chris said, I really appreciate it when students give me drafts of their essays. That's incredibly helpful. Your faculty, no matter where you are very used to writing letters of recommendation. So they're going to have a lot of skills in place. It's really important to ask someone who knows you and the work you do well. That is often sort of the hardest thing, but actually at a small college, that might be an easier task to fulfill.
And it's not necessary for all your references to come from faculty members. Some people have amazing jobs and their supervisors can give them really good references because they know them well.
Please make sure that at least 2 letters of reference are submitted. If you don't submit, if 2 letters aren't submitted, then all the work you do on an application is going to be for naught because it's not even going to be reviewed. you need 2, you can, 3 will be used, and you can list up to 5, and you can rank them. And for example, let's say you rank them, and one of the top 3 that you ranked for some reason can't get it in, can't get their letter in, then one of the others will be rotated in. So you'll have at least 2 and hopefully 3. But please make sure that you have at least 2 letters, because it's a mandatory requirement for GRFP.
Yeah, in addition to knowing how to write the letters, as Chris said, make sure they know how to submit it. Because there is, I know of a horrific case where this guy wrote a great letter, I'm sure, I never saw it, because he didn't click the button that said something like, are you sure you want to submit it? And he thought he had. So make sure they know that it's not as simple as buying something at Amazon.
I think you can see on Fastlane if they've submitted it, right? Is that
Yes, you can.
Yeah, but they won't get a notice if they haven't. Well, they actually will get a notice, right, Chris? If they haven't submitted.
The applicant, as an applicant, you can look and see if the letters of reference have been submitted.
I think Rachel has her hand raised.
Thank you. I had a question about the figures, the hypothetical figures that are suggested to be included in the guidelines for anticipated results of your project. I'm wondering how much we can pull from other sources as well. Say if I had expected results that were very similar to another paper that had been published, we probably shouldn't include an example of a figure from another paper that we expect to see the results of for, say, like a preliminary experiment or something. Could you speak on the figures we should include a little bit more in our application?
Well, one thing I would say is consider this from the perspective of a potential reviewer and how they might take into account whatever you do in terms of your research statement or your personal statement. So whatever product you provide will be reviewed by people that are trying to get a good idea of your potential, your demonstrated potential, and think about the reviewer when you're preparing each part of your application.
Yes, remember that you're telling a whole story. So if that figure is significant and you're telling that story, then that's when you would include it. If it's not significant in telling that story, or it's extra, you know, say your advisor read through it and said it's not a good idea to include it, then in that case you wouldn't include it. But there is no specific rules, and each reviewer reviews a little differently. So.
Awesome, thank you. And I think Tabitha has a question.
Yes, thank you. So for going back to broader impacts, I understand that NSF does not consider public health-based projects, but if there are broader impacts that may include public health applications, should that be written about in the broader impact section?
Well, the broader impacts are about your broader impact, not your intellectual merit, and your broader impacts are 2 different things. If your field of study is in one of the eligible fields of study, then you can't say, well, my broader impacts is in this area, but it doesn't match my major field of study, because remember, you're going to school for that major field of study. So as long as your primary, your major field of study is this field, your broader impacts could be anywhere. You can't say it can't be at the 4-H or the Boy Scouts. I mean, a lot of those things are broader impacts.
Please be clear about the basic research that you're doing or would propose to do, and separate that from the potential broader impacts.
Thank you.
There's another question about recommendation letters, and they're asking if it can be from a couple, even if they worked in a lab with significant others. I don't know. Can they be from that couple, or should it be from separate?
Couple, you meaning husband and wife?
Yes.
I don't know, but I'm not sure there's a rule on whether husband and wife are able to submit. I mean, sometimes no one would know it at any rate. There's nothing to click to say that these two individuals are related.
Yeah.
My reviewers for when I applied for the GRFP, I had 2 couples write letters together, but you have to assign the reviewer to one of the husband and spouse couple. So I still had 3 review letters. 2 of those were written by couple pairs. So you can submit or have submitted from couples, but you can only assign that review to one person.
Okay, yeah, that was my question. Because yeah, I did run into that with a, I mean, it was something different. It was a scholarship, but they asked me not to include people who were, I guess, quote unquote related because they shared the same last name.
It's up to you to select who you want as a reference writer for GRFP.
Then Carla D. Limaberg, do you have your hand raised again, or?
Yeah, I just, sorry, to jump off of that, if you have had like multiple mentors in your lab while doing your research, like I have a PhD candidate and a PI that I've been working with, should you kind of pick one to write a letter of reference for you, since I worked on like the same project with both of them? Like, how would you approach going about that if I don't feel like they're going to be able to talk about significantly different projects or aspects of my project? Should I only pick one?
Well, you're going to get a lot of advice about different ways to decide who might be a good reference writer. My advice is pick the people who will write the best letters for you, okay? And think about that in terms of what a best letter is. It's one that will impress the reviewers. So think about who can help you impress the reviewers. I know that's kind of generic advice, but I would use that as the basic principle and use it towards the goal of finding the people that will write the best review letter of reference for you.
I would say again, we said this application, you're telling the story of yourself. So if references could support that story, and also sometimes references can mention things that don't necessarily go in a story, but would make you a good overall applicant.
And just to amplify Dr. Norman's comments, I think you do want to make sure that your letters paint a comprehensive picture of who you are as a young scientist.
Does anybody have any other questions for our panelist? This is your time to ask. Shelley, is there anything you wish you knew when you were applying for the GRFP that we haven't covered?
I guess like one thing I ran into was the resumes, and a question I had while submitting, and I believe this is actually outlined in the solicitation, but it might be good to hear. You started your first year of graduate school and you don't really have a transcript. So what should you do in that case?
It is actually detailed in the solicitation, which you should follow. Keep in mind, we're giving this presentation today, but you have to make sure that before you submit, you've read the solicitation. Another thing, you're going to think of a lot of questions even when we're not here. We take it very seriously, applicant questions. So please go to that info at grfp.nsf. Well, we better put it back up there because info at grfp.nsf, or Jill, what is it exactly?
I'm getting it up there. So let's see what we can.
nsfgrfp.org.
Everybody see that?
Yes, you said that. That's awesome.
So please don't be shy to contact us there to ask those questions also.
The other piece of advice kind of connected with that is start your application early and submit it early. That way, if there is some little something that goes wrong with your computer or the electrical system or something like that, you are totally prepared and you're all confident because you got your thing in weeks and weeks ahead of time. So it's really important to start working on this application now and submit it early.
One thing that helped me that maybe just to build on that is you're going to apply for maybe more than GRFP. Maybe you apply for a couple of fellowships. For me, it helped to let my references know I'm going to apply to these list of fellowships so that you're not coming back and forth and you don't feel uncomfortable with asking them for the reference to that next fellowship you're applying for.
That's all great advice. Is there any last parting words for our presenters you might have to students applying for the GRFP?
Please make sure you review the frequently asked questions and that the fellowship goes to the applicant, but the funding goes to the institution that you choose.
Yes, and have fun. Do a good job, but have fun.
All right. Do you have any last things, Dr. McCourt or Ingram?
I was going to put this in the chat, but I'll skip that. One of the things is my institution has a fellowships office, and I think a lot of places do. So if in the age of COVID-19, you might not be aware of all your campus resources, but look around and find there might be student groups of people who have had them, have applied for them, or faculty who have served as program officers and have advice or whatever. And you know, that kind of input is legit as long as it remains your proposal and you're doing it. In my opinion, I think that fulfills the guidelines.
Chelsea, it looks like there is one last question that probably the GRFP people can answer. What's the ongoing commitment to NSF upon receipt of the award? Reporting kinds of things, I suspect. Okay,
if you apply and you submit and your letter is a reference, you get 2 letters in, and next April you're selected, then you start the process of being a GRFP fellow, and you'll be able to be a fellow, an active fellow for 5 years. 3 of those 5 years you can receive funding, but every year, at the end of every academic year, you have to send in an activities report that lists the kinds of things that you've been doing as part of your graduate education experience. So that's one of the main points of accountability in terms of the annual cycle connected with the fellowship. There is no service requirement connected with GRFP. So that's a little different than some federal fellowships.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here and answering all these questions.
Of course, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Good luck, botanists.
If you're participants, stay on, but if you're the panelists, you can head out.
Thank you very much.
So much.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Good luck to everybody.
So now we're going to be talking outside of the panelist, which Chelsea is going to lead. So if you're a participant in the workshop moving forward, this is a good time to get general advice and to talk more, so please stay on.
All right. So I first want to go over the rest of the workshop. So you've now heard kind of like a little bit of an introduction to the GRFP, how to apply for it, what to expect, and things like that, which is really great and helpful to just start and to start thinking about it, because we know that the GRFP is important. We want to get it because there's so much money involved with it. So now you kind of have a jumping off point to go with, but now the rest of the workshop, you have been put into small groups. You'll be paired with 4 other students. So each group has 5 students, and you'll start writing your drafts, submit your drafts. You should hear from your group leaders within the next week or so. And if you haven't heard by Monday, please email me and I'll make sure that either I'm nudging those mentors or that you are actually put into a group and that you are on the track to writing this. This part of the workshop is to help you aid in the process of writing the GRFP. It's not a final edit or anything like that. It's to set deadlines for yourself. So you're like, okay, 6 weeks out, I have even just an outline of my project proposal, which is going to be important because it's throughout that you're going to be thinking about how do I change my project? What questions am I actually asking? Are these methods actually addressing those questions? And that's going to be important and great to get that feedback. So when you're working in your groups, you're also going to be expected to review one other person's proposal, which is also really great to just see how other people are thinking and how they're approaching questions. You can do more than that one person, but that one person you're going to be responsible for giving the major feedback from within the group. You might be a little like, oh, but we're competing for the same grant. I think that's okay. Science should be collaborative. You should be working together to make the best science that we can. Also, it's like a lot of times the GRFP feels very, very random on who gets it. So as long as you have like an outstanding application, that's all you can do and you can put in. A lot of times you might just get reviewers that maybe they just didn't understand. Maybe you were like the third, like somewhere within their stack of reviews that didn't get as much attention or something like that. And sometimes that happens and that's just, it is what it is. You'll meet for your research part of it, and then you'll also meet for your personal statements. I think it's up to you and how much time your mentors have if you'll do a second research aspect of it. Are there any other questions about that format of this workshop? And if you do, you can ask later, get information. I also just kind of wanted to share my screen and like kind of walk through some of the stuff that was talked about just to get like those nervousness about starting out of the way. Because I do feel like just seeing stuff can be a little intimidating. So this is, if you haven't visited yet, you should totally visit this. It's the GRFP Fellowship Program website. They give a good explanation of what things are, good advice for applications. So within here, you're going to have your frequently asked questions, and there is some really good advice in here, talking about eligibility and things like that, field of study requirements, which is helpful. When you're ready to submit, the thing is you can also, like, if you know you're applying for this, you can go ahead and get on Fastlane, create your account, and just start asking people for rec letters. You don't have to submit your application before you ask for rec letters. So you're going to go here, you're going to apply here. It'll take you to Fastlane. It'll take you to a different account, a different page. Also on this website is good advice for letter writers. So you should totally be sending this to whoever you're asking to write your rec letters. It's going to outline different things. There's going to see your frequently asked questions for them and tips. So those are helpful. Also, you are given this, so it's this resource guide 2020. They're just a list of, so first it starts with like the timeline of the rest of the workshop. What is expected for your GRFP application, but once again, always refer to the official website. And if you have questions, like Dr. Norman was saying, is like they're really great with asking things. So if you have like the specific, like, oh, I've taken credits, graduate credits as an undergrad, blah blah blah, so many hours. Where does that make me fall in with what level I should be applying for? They would be able to help you, and they're pretty responsive. And then here, there's a bunch of different websites that you can visit if you haven't visited. I think you're going to get so much information that it might be a little bit overwhelming. So it's one of those things you just got to pick one thing, start writing, and going from there. Like, this is just an example of one of the links that are on there. So it's like, what is the GRFP, the requirements, and then if you want more details. Also, I will share this around too, but these are also other great resources that if you want to use, especially like the editing and reviewing aspects of it. There's a couple of programs that could help you when you're writing it. Another resource that I think a lot of people should know about is this academic phrase book. So when you're writing and you're needing to write into a scientific language, it will help you use different words and lingos, the right lingo kind of thing of like, how do I address this in a productive way? So those are just some resources that you should be looking at and starting to think about using. You have a week to get your first draft done, which can seem overwhelming, but just a reminder, start with an outline and kind of go from there. What is your question? What hypothesis? And work on that.
We will be sending 12 example proposals that were funded from BSA members or mentors for this workshop. So we'll be sending that shortly, and reading other people's proposals was really helpful for me because I kind of got to see like, how did they write about their research experience and their personal statement, and what are broader impacts, things like that. It's really good to look at these other proposals, and we've included the reviews. So when you get reviews back from submitting an NSF GRFP, they kind of outline what was good and what was not so good about your proposal, what was the strengths. And so you should definitely, when reading these proposals, look at that to see what reviewers captured. Like Chelsea said, it is kind of random, but knowing generally what are they grouping as broader impacts versus intellectual merit when they're reviewing the applications, because those are just summary boxes on the review. You should definitely try to see, what is grouping and what are people judging as that. Alexis says, I missed a chance to sign up for the workshop, but can I get emailed example as well? Please email Chelsea or me and we'll see. We're hoping to keep these only within the workshop. So if you are shared these examples, please do not share them outside of BSA or with friends or anything like that. These are very personal sometimes, and so those who shared with us do not want these to end up on websites or outside of this group of people.
And it's actually kind of cool because you could see it probably like over the different years too. So you can look at the more recent ones if you're interested in like what recently was getting published, or accepted. I mean, not published, accepted. But yeah, so that's good. And it's also interesting to see everyone has a little bit different style. Like different people will bold, some people won't. People put figures, some people don't. Like also looking to see how each person does their citations, and that's going to be important because you need to save space and things like that. What's really great is in all of your working groups, you're going to have a GRFP fellow in it so that you can ask them specific questions too as things arise, because they haven't been through the process. They have sat through these kind of workshops when they were applying and things like that. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions, concerns? It is stressful, but it can be fun. Okay, so a question from Lauren was, my personal statement is similar to one of the examples I was emailed because I have a similar life story. Should I be No, I don't. Like, if you have similar life stories, that's okay. I think it's also like thinking of when you're writing these personal statements, how do you incorporate, like Dr. Hill was saying, you as a broader impact, and that's almost like a way to highlight that. Also, how did you get into science and things like that, which I think that's important. Yeah, and then Rachel, just send me an email specifically. Is there any other questions, comments?
I had a question kind of about the timeline. I'm hoping to give my reviewer or my letter writers as much time as possible because I know that they can be really slow. Do you have any recommendations for maybe how long is a nice cushion to like give them to get the letters in and things like that?
So you can submit them to be letter writers now. You can make your Fastlane account and put their information in. I applied when I was an undergrad, and I like baked one of my advisor's cookies because he needed like to be eating something that I gave him to write any of my recommendation letters. So like grad school, I had to bake cookies, or any grant, I had to bake cookies. If he wasn't putting something in his mouth, he like couldn't remember to do it. So
oh my God.
Do what you have to do. If you have to do cookies or you need to like meet with them to make them write the letter, make sure you do that. But you can set it up now. So giving them the time starting now, it's a little long because they wouldn't have your proposal yet. Just make sure that you give them time when they have all the information.
Gotcha.
I would also suggest making sure to actually ask 5 people. And then what you'll do is you'll rank your recommendation letters. So if somebody is being a little pokey, like maybe your 4th or 5th one does get reviewed, even though you're like, it's probably gonna be a weaker letter since they don't know me as well, but it's still better than nothing. So definitely make sure you, like your first 2 is like your best, and then kind of go from there.
Okay.
Also, I don't think it's a bad idea to like, oh, I've done this kind of outreach, let me talk to you about it, and things like that, if you want that highlighted in your recommendation letters.
Okay, kind of like
this is what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what I've done. Can you make sure to mention that kind of thing?
Yeah. Man, 5 feels like a lot. Like, I'm trying to think of 5, like, we'll see. But okay, thank you guys.
I think you can do it. 3 is okay too.
Yeah.
And like start building, like reconnecting with people since everything is virtual right now. Like maybe it's like, I know they're gonna be at my recommendation letter, and maybe I just want to like check up and see how things are going and talk to them. Not a bad idea.
I wanted to stress, they said that you didn't need faculty mentors to be every letter writer. So think about jobs you've had, or think about volunteer opportunities you've done, or any broader impact, anything, or anything just outside of research that you might have done and someone you've connected with. They don't have to have a PhD to write you a recommendation letter for this if they can talk about you in one of your strengths. It does not look bad to only have 3 because you can only have 3 reviewed.
Is there any last questions? If not, thank you guys for attending, and we look forward with working you over the next couple of weeks and seeing what your proposal end up looking like. Hopefully some of you get funded. All right, bye guys.
Well, thank you guys so much for organizing this.
Yeah,
thank you.
Awesome resource.
Thank you a lot.
Thanks.